A multi-trillion-dollar air cargo order vanished overnight. A press release from the White House, and then a 245% tariff was slapped down, among the harshest trade penalties in modern history. This is no longer a simple trade war. This is a declaration of war against anyone who dares to challenge America's #1 position. Trump didn't say much. He only retweeted the White House press release, and immediately the stock market plummeted. When China announced it would stop buying Boeing aircraft, they didn't just cancel a multi-trillion-dollar order, they were tearing up the last vestige of trust in US-China trade. For Trump, this wasn't an economic decision, it was a deliberate insult. Just hours later, the 245% tariff was announced, an unprecedented strike in modern trade history. Trump called it a necessary response to betrayal, but to other nations, this was a retaliatory measure with teeth, a president unwilling to let anyone take America's place. Instead of negotiating, he lashed out. He strong-armed them away from the negotiating table, forcing them to abandon the entire deal. And to demonstrate the consequences, he used Boeing as the ultimate leverage, a stark warning against challenging the #1 power. At this point, tariffs were no longer a trade tool, it was raw power. And Trump, with thunderous rhetoric, even if it violated policy, made sure the world's major players heard him. No bullets were fired, but when Beijing coldly withdrew from the largest aviation deal with the US, Wall Street seemed to hear the shattering of a fragile trade order. China announced it would stop buying Boeing aircraft, a contract worth hundreds of billions of dollars once hailed as a symbol of peace between the world's two largest economies. A deal that Trump once proudly called the greatest trade achievement in American history. Now it was ripped apart unceremoniously, like a wordless breakup from Beijing. For China, this was a bloodless warning shot, but with geopolitical weight. For Trump, it was a public humiliation on the global trade stage. No warnings, no negotiations, just simply walking away. Boeing is not just an airline company, it's an industrial icon, the brainchild of modern America. And for decades, Boeing, along with Apple, Intel, Coca-Cola, represented the dream of global Americanization. When China rejected Boeing, they didn't just reject a product, they rejected a status. They implicitly sent a message. We are strong enough to make America lose a symbol without firing a shot. The damage isn't just in the planes that haven't left the factory. It's also in American workers, the Seattle supply chain, Wall Street shareholders, and deeper, the wounded pride of a president unaccustomed to being disregarded. Trump had expected Boeing to be a peace offering, to prove his deal-making prowess. But when that gift was flatly rejected, it became a thorn in the side of his America First ideal. And for Trump, being rejected isn't a setback, it's a reason to strike back. When a plane doesn't take off, a political decision begins to land. It's often said that policy needs reason, but with Trump, sometimes emotion is reason enough to sign an executive order. Immediately after China tore up the Boeing deal, the White House didn't hold a press conference. No diplomatic messages, just a quietly released statement, but heavier than thunder. The US would impose tariffs of up to 245% on Chinese goods. 245%, not a random number. It's the cumulative result of three things: 125% as a direct retaliatory tariff, a trade counterstrike, 20% attributed to the fentanyl crisis. Trump accused China of turning a blind eye to the flood of synthetic drugs into the US, and 100% from Section 301, a tool the US often uses to punish nations that act unfairly against American interests. All of this was packaged into a single policy, presented under a legal guise but deeply imprinted with a personal touch. Because if it were truly only aimed at fentanyl, the US could have targeted chemical manufacturers. If it were really about trade practices, they could have filed a lawsuit at the WTO. But Trump didn't choose to take the roundabout route. He went straight and struck head-on. For him, China stopping Boeing purchases wasn't simply a trade shift. Boeing wasn't just the name affected. Boeing was the most obvious political casualty of an escalating confrontation that went beyond trade books. When China stopped buying Boeing, it wasn't just damage to a business, it was Beijing's way of choosing the right spot to strike, both hurting America economically and hurting Trump politically. Trump had used Boeing as a symbol of success for renegotiable trade. Every Boeing export contract was once touted by him as proof of personal ability as a great deal maker. And now, China tore down that symbol, turning Boeing into a pawn sacrificed on the chessboard of power. Boeing itself had to issue a separate statement, distancing itself from the war of words, trying to maintain neutrality. But that silence further showed American businesses were being dragged into a battlefield they didn't choose. Boeing doesn't make policy. Boeing just makes airplanes. But when policy becomes a weapon, then those who make airplanes are also turned into human shields for political confrontation. And of course, when insulted, Trump doesn't write memoirs. He writes tariffs. The announced 245% tariff wasn't issued for negotiation. It didn't open the door for dialogue. Under Trump, whoever makes America lose face will pay the price. Many scholars call this an emotional policy, but if you're familiar with Trump, you'll understand. When emotion is strong enough, it becomes policy. And when policy is decisive enough, it doesn't need to be explained. It just needs to be implemented. This isn't just a trade order. This is a political reflex. When a president sees a diplomatic slap in the face as a reason to unleash a financial blow, Trump may act on emotion, but to think it stops at emotion is to underestimate one of the most powerful strategists of our time. Because after the 245% tariff, it wasn't merely angry reactions that followed, but an attempt to reshape the global playing field in a way Trump believed America should be on top. Tariffs in Trump's hands are not just barriers, they are weapons, tools of coercion, rearranging the economic order and testing the loyalty of allies. By imposing the 245% tariff, Trump wasn't just targeting China. He sent a signal to the entire world. If you want access to the American market, play by our rules or don't play. This is how Trump turns emotion into global strategy, a blow that stunned China, but also made other trade partners become wary. Canada, Mexico, Europe, everyone is looking at the blow to China and asking themselves, am I next? For Trump, that is part of the MAGA doctrine, a doctrine in which America no longer plays the role of persuasion, but takes on the role of dictation. Foreign trade policy is no longer about balancing interests, it has become a test of power and loyalty. These tariffs now aren't just weighing on products, they weigh on the principles of free trade. For over 70 years, from GATT to WTO, Trump doesn't care about the old global order. He cares about obedience. No need for ideals, just effectiveness. And the 245% tariff isn't just a stick, it's a new declaration. America isn't asking for the number one position. America is taking it back, one tariff percentage point at a time. When tariffs become strategy, trade is no longer a playing field, but a geopolitical test. Trump strikes with executive orders, but Beijing doesn't respond with outrage. They respond with silence and strategy. No harsh messages, no immediate tit for tat, just a simple statement, but enough to send a chill down Washington's spine. China does not desire a trade war, but it does not fear one either. That wasn't a threat. It was the declaration of a nation accustomed to bloodless wars, where time is an ally and slow response is intentional. While the US pushed tariffs to 245%, China didn't choose a point-for-point retaliation. They chose to redirect economic flows. Airbus was immediately favored over Boeing. Agreements with ASEAN, the Middle East, Africa were signed at lightning speed, and within weeks, China forged strategic partnerships with over 40 nations, broadly expanding non-American supply chains. By not reacting as the US expected, Beijing demonstrated one thing: China wasn't playing an emotional game. They were playing chess. And in that game, a quick reaction doesn't equate to intelligence. Beijing understood making America angry is a tactic, but making America unleash its anger at the wrong target, that's the art. While Trump used tariffs to assert power, China used Trump's tariffs to solidify its victim status and push the US into the role of destabilizer. When developing nations saw the 245% blow aimed at China, they didn't see a powerful superpower. They saw an America no longer in control of its confidence, but rather a China gradually leading the rest of the world without needing open confrontation, just patience and calculation. No need for threats, no need for weapons. China just needs to wait for its opponent to get trapped in the game it created. Boeing was once a symbol of cooperation. Now it has become a casualty of confrontation. Tariffs were once tools to balance trade. Now they are the language of power and instruments of retaliation. Trump didn't just impose tariffs. He rewrote how America projects strength, with the letters MAGA imprinted on every executive order. China doesn't need loud retaliation. They respond like a seasoned player. No need to win today, just control tomorrow. The world is entering an era where trade policy is no longer about numbers, but an expression of ideology. And when an economic decision can shake the foundations of global geopolitics, the question is, are we witnessing a trade confrontation or a reshaping of the world order through tariff price tags?